October 28, 1994, Norfolk Southern Corporation announced to the public the end of their steam excursion program, thus the end of an era that had lasted some 28 years. The star of it all, Norfolk and Western Class J number 611, would finish out the 1994 season. Only a few trips remained, with 611 pulling trips out of Bristol, Tennessee, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina. After that, according to NS, 611 is to be returned to Roanoke, her hometown, where she was built in 1950, to be permanently retired and displayed at the Virginia Museum of Transportation in town. In Roanoke, the announcement hit hard on that Friday afternoon. It was news just in time, for Engine 611 was arriving in Roanoke the next day on a run from Bristol, Tennessee. It was to be the last time Roanokers would see this beautiful train in steam hauling passengers. Watching the 611 leave from the Roanoke station had been a 12-year tradition. Many people here remember the great fleet of 14 Class J's of the Norfolk and Western. Their power and classy lines were second to none. 611, the only J to escape the scrapper's torch in the 50s, was coming home. As the coal-burning giant departed for the return trip to Bristol, her friends would gather and wave goodbye for the last time. Her loud barking stack talk and that steamboat whistle was her way of returning the gesture on Saturday, October 29th, 1994. During the morning hours prior to 611's arrival, a local radio station fielded several calls concerning the day's events. You're talking to us from Bristol, Tennessee, right?
Yes, I am. Right across the street from the station where it'll be boarding. The train will be boarding at 7:30. I'm in the Bristol, Virginia Police Department.
And that's where the train departs from, because I do believe that the old buildings of the railroad are no longer there, so you're going to depart from the police station, right?
No, I'm in the police station phone. We were talking to you at this time. They have a station there, or a platform we're going to load on.
Okay. Now, all right, the scheduled departure time is at 7:30, and you're due to arrive in Roanoke on this Bristol trip at about noon time or 1 o'clock, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's what I was told.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jerry, what's the mood down there? This is the bomb was dropped yesterday afternoon. My phone was ringing. It was on the 6 o'clock news here. It's in the morning paper today. What's the feeling down there as folks are ready to ride a train for its last run to the place it was born in Roanoke?
There's a somber crowd here today. Most of the people, a lot of them I've heard talking, are kind of upset that Norfolk Southern is going to do this, drop the steam program like they're doing it, because they see the beautiful engine sitting over there. I was standing here at 4 o'clock this morning watching them stroking the coal up and everything like that. You know, such a beautiful thing, watching them work on her and getting her ready for the day's ride and everything.
Right.
And people are so upset that they cannot believe they're going to stop the program at such a time and everything.
Well, it has caught Mayor Bowers of Roanoke off guard. There's a quote with him in today's paper. Nonetheless, it's a very sad occasion with Bob Saxon and Jack Taylor engineering the 611 today. We anticipate a very dramatic departure at 3:30.
Yes, I have some things to give Bob Saxton today.
So a lot of folks with the Roanoke Chapter National Railway Historical Society are very long-faced this morning, and we urge all of those listening to us now to go down to the station and watch this train leave for the last time with the train in Roanoke today. The departure time at 3:30, correct, at the old station?
Yeah, the way it looked out here just now when I was standing outside when they fired her up and got her just getting ready to pull off, she was beautiful. It was a beautiful shot. I wish I had my camera in my hand. I'd put it in the trunk of the car to come over here and call you on the phone, sir. It's a beautiful shot. I wish I could have got it.
Well, there'll be a lot of beautiful shots, and I will see you down there, the trackside at the old N&W passenger station in Roanoke, right in front of the Hotel Roanoke. And I hope myself and many, many Roanokers will come down and see this great lady.
Anybody listening in the Roanoke area ought to be standing on the side of the railroad tracks.
Now, you're coming in from Marion and up towards Rural Retreat and Wytheville and Pulaski and Radford, and then turning on the track, the leg that brings you into Roanoke. You'll come down Christiansburg through Ellison and beyond the old Kroger warehouse out towards Glenver and into Salem. The engine will be detached. Is this right? At Schaefer's Crossing, they'll be reserviced, and then the engine will be brought down to pick up the train later on in the day before she takes off. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's what I was told this morning.
All right. Look, we have to run. Appreciate your call, Jerry. Enjoy the trip. It's going to be the last one to ride in or out of Roanoke, and we hope to see you down here later today.
I hope to see you when I get in, bud.
Thank you, sir. Well, have a great trip.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
611's days were numbered, but she would have 3 more weekends to show the world what the most powerful steam locomotive ever designed for passenger service could do. After the Roanoke-Bristol trip, 611 deadheaded back to Roanoke to be serviced and ready for the next weekend's trips out of Charlotte. Deadheading or running light, she was towed by a diesel to Glade Spring, Virginia, where she was turned around and was greeted by several onlookers from the local area. On this Sunday, this was 611's final trip in her excursion career on the Bristol line. She entered Roanoke Yard just before sundown. That evening in the yard at Schaefer's Crossing, the 611 was a stranger from the past, slowly entering the engine facility here in Roanoke. The locomotive would be serviced and prepped for the upcoming weekend of trips out of Charlotte. It's this same location that during the days of steam, 611 would have been in the company of many steam engines waiting for their runs. With her racy lines, it's clear to see that she was meant for more high-speed tasks. Truly, on this night, with the decision already made by Norfolk Southern to drop steam excursions, 611 is an endangered species, living out her last evening under steam in Roanoke. To better understand the power, the 5,200 horsepower that 611 produces, we go to Old Fort, North Carolina, where the train headed to on November 5th, 1994. This is the base, the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, which rise 1 mile above Old Fort. The rails reached here in 1869, but they stopped here. Passengers going on to Asheville had to ride a stagecoach up the mountain. By 1880, the first train left Old Fort and traveled west over what motorists on nearby I-40 refer to as Black Mountain. The hill is steep, the track is winding. The train must travel 13.5 miles to go a distance of 3.5 straight line miles. Coal trains from West Virginia with coal on their way to Georgia must creep down the grade, break smoke, and 2 to 3 rear diesels are used to assist in braking. And going up, 5 to 8 locomotives are needed to lift the train to the summit. In 1994, 611 made her last trip up this mountain range. She had done so many times in the 90s. It was the ride of a lifetime to be in the cab with fireman Steve Webb and veteran engineer Jack Taylor. as 611 stepped at 15 miles an hour uphill beyond Old Fort. A few shots from a similar trip during the summer shows what 611 had lying ahead. With the diesel added to help in the event that the J would slip, the locomotive for Roanoke put on quite a show. The ride up to Black Mountain from inside the cab of 611 is like nothing else in this world. On this November 5th trip up the mountain, this was 611's last one. During the entire climb up, fireman and engineer paid close attention to the sounds of the locomotive. It's 611's way of talking back as to what it needs. You won't find this stuff in an operating manual. It's simply man and machine in tune to one another. Steve Webb watches the water level and adds more as the locomotive consumes it to make steam. Jack Taylor takes his hand and feels the machine's need for more power and ready to add sand to the rails in case the engine slips up the steep climb. A senior operating person of this division rides along and calls out the passing of green trackside signals. John, also part of the 611 crew, is there to blow the throaty whistle that belongs to only one locomotive in the world, Engine 611. And this all goes on in perfect harmony. As a side note, I was amazed as I filmed this. I will never forget those two men, pros in their own right, doing their job, and never a word was exchanged between them. They knew exactly what to do. So sit back and watch. This is beautiful country. It's hard to believe that over 150 men were killed in the construction of this line that included early uses of nitroglycerin to help cut through the rock. The train ducks through 7 tunnels. Some are short, but the granddaddy of them all is the last one at the top, Schwannanoa Tunnel. It is over 1,800 feet long, and with 611 still pounding up grade, every window and opening are closed. Everyone in the cab must use water-soaked towels over their nose and mouth. Entering this tunnel, light from the other end barely makes it through. Inside 611's cab, there is only the light from nearby gauges, and fire shines through the firebox door. And again, the experience is awesome. As 611 exits the tunnel, it crests the Eastern Continental Divide at Ridgecrest, elevation 2,575 feet. With the grade behind her and only 17 miles left to Asheville, 611 wastes no time in showing what the Roanoke shops designed her to do. Time was ticking away on engine 611. On November 13th, she would pull her last trip, as printed in the 1994 Norfolk Southern steam schedule. 611 traveled to Asheville, North Carolina once more, but this time from Greenville, South Carolina. The last trip would have things go out with a bang. 611 would have to climb the famous Saluda grade. Saluda is the steepest incline of any mainline railroad in the United States. With runaway tracks for downhill trains in trouble, this section of the line is so steep that the end of a passenger car going up the hill is 4 feet higher than the other end. It is 6 a.m. at the NS Yard in Greenville. Passengers are waiting at the Amtrak station where it is very cold, 36 degrees. It was the cold temperature that allowed the escaping steam from 611 to put on a most memorable sight on this historic day. It was the cold air, the last steam trip, and the lucky 13th day of November that waiting passengers kept in the back of their minds. 611 is a machine to some, but many knew she was looking back at her fans for one last time, proudly spraying steam from her cylinders. Behind her tool car, 3 diesels were added. They merely rode along on this trip as their muscle would be put to test up the road on Saluda Mountain. With the sun coming up and the temperature still falling, 611 left Greenville at 7 a.m. This is the last steam train to go up Saluda Mountain, and no one here needs to be reminded of that. The younger ones will later on learn what this day was all about. Here, the 611 will take her water car and tool car, along with the first 3 coaches, up the grade. The diesels will proceed ahead and take the rest of the train. The crew was worried about the ice on the rail, thus 611 only taking 3 coaches on this last ride up the hill. Meanwhile, in town, 3 miles away, downtown Saluda is bustling. Thousands of people have come to this tiny town to see the 611. However, some are just not accustomed to all of the excitement. Near the top of the hill, some trees were rearranged, and I nestled down to get to the closest I've ever been to the 611, and the shot was well worth it. Whoever said a train didn't mean something to people should confer with those in Saluda who put up this sign. Quickly the event was over. Memories were cast. The train was put back together at Saluda and continued on to Asheville. In a vacant field, an old Chevrolet from the 1950s sits, rusting away. Behind that one lies an old Chevy Apache model from the early 1960s. And from the past, 611 from 1950 rolls by. In a style that is all her own, the big engine highballs through Skyland, North Carolina, outspeeding nearby motorists and our camera. Arriving in Asheville, 611 marked the occasion by wearing black flags next to her front marker lights, and below the headlight, attached to the chrome handrail, a dozen roses. They were black. With her diesel helpers using their engines for braking, 611 enters Asheville Yard. At the old Southern freight station in Asheville stood what the Norfolk and Western referred to as the modern coal-burning locomotive. Here she sat among her friends. Inbound engineer Jack Taylor signed autographs as if he was Babe Ruth, while outbound engineer Bob Saxton prepared for the return trip. Although this trip officially finished out the '94 season and the closeout of 28 years of steam excursions on the railroad, the last day to many in Roanoke was on October 29th, with 611 arriving in from Bristol, running through the wind, just like she was meant to do. Along the tracks in Roanoke, people were standing anywhere where they could get a good view of this machine, the one their grandfathers built, the one they came out to say goodbye to. 611 departed her hometown at 3:28 p.m. She blasted nearby windows with her noise as engineer Bob Saxton continuously pulled back on her throttle on a day this town will never forget.
Can we share that Reese had
I got a picture of the cows running.
Angie, what are your
As the sun sets in Wytheville, Virginia, 611 heads southwest to Bristol. She is moments away from rural retreat. This is where O. Winston Link recorded the sounds of Class J number 603 at 9:39 p.m. Christmas Eve, 1957. The recording captured the sounds of number 42, the Pelican, going from New Orleans to Washington, D.C., along with the nearby Lutheran church chimes playing Silent Night as the locomotive whistled in the background. It is this recording that has put rural retreat on the map, so to speak, and everyone here knows about it. On this historic night, the J returns to this town. The people respond to her call, a throaty whistle way off in the distance. They know she will not be back after this night. They wave, and flashbulbs go off to capture the event. The night sky is quiet, except for the sound of 611. 611 continued on to Bristol that night. There is no doubt that those who were standing along the tracks that evening in rural retreat went home with something they will remember for a very long time. Grandchildren will learn of a night in 1994 when a great steam engine rolled through their little town for the last time. Grandparents will explain what a steam engine is all about and how cameras capture that historic night in just a mere flash. They will explain why many eyes got wet and why they still smile, recalling the moment. On December 3, 1994, 611 headed back to the NS Steam Shops in Birmingham, Alabama. The locomotive powered a memorable Santa Claus special to Chattanooga, Tennessee. This was the very last trip for the streamlined engine. Those who were there tell of a day that was rough on everybody. From the operating crew to the hundreds who came in from all over the country to be on this train, many simply couldn't hold back the tears.
And you all of you represent people who have worked with us for years or not so many years. Some of you may not know each other, but believe me, you're all very special folks, and I hope you will meet the other guys from Chicago and St. Louis and down in Jacksonville, moved to Birmingham, and Huntsville, and all over the place. So just, hey, enjoy it.
A scene repeated many times, a human hand touching 611 for one last time, to feel the warmth of a live steam engine, knowing what the touch would feel like later on in a museum. Yes, the decision may have been made to end steam operations, but words below the armrest of engineer Bob Saxton pretty much summed it up, although it didn't ease the pain. 611 arrived at the Chattanooga station by midday and posed for the photographers next to resident steamer number 610, and there to put on a smile on many faces, James Beislein. Mr. Beislein was manager of steam operations on the Norfolk Southern until 1986. His days go back to the Southern Railway, where the first steam excursion was held 28 years ago with Southern 4501. On this day, he shares his charm with the crowd.
In the rain. In the rain. Fine. How do you have food? Yeah. I don't have any smoke or cinders on me, but that's all right. Yeah. When's your next shift? Huh? When's your next shift? 4 o'clock. All right. You get frequent flyer miles if you come. Yeah.
This was a special moment to have James Beislein and his successor Carl Jensen standing together, the two men that kept steam alive in a much diesel-powered world. Wearing commemorative flags for the occasion, 611 stood proud with her two bosses in the rain as everyone took a snapshot. It is 3:30 p.m., December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 1994. In less than 30 minutes, 611 will be rolling into town right through here. Entering the east side of Roanoke, 611 would pass by the Hollins Road truck-to-train trash transfer station. Then she would pass by the massive East End shops of the railroad, the place where 611 was born in 1950. Past the tall boiler shops where the locomotives stood on their end during their construction. She would also slow to a crawl, making it all look like the big engine knew what was lurking ahead. Norfolk Southern's huge engine terminal at Schaefer's Crossing, the place where she would sit outside. Here she would run no more. Her fires would slowly fade out, and this was it, the end of the line. 17 miles east of Roanoke, the show begins at Montville, Virginia, and eastbound time freight highballs out of town, clearing the way for westbound 611. story of 611's final runs includes the last time she stepped onto American rails to a new permanent home at the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke. While construction crews broke new ground for the Jay's final resting place in the summer of '95, Norfolk Southern agreed to have the locomotive stored in the historic East End shops, where 611 and her 13 identical sisters were built. And for the next 10 months, she sat here quietly. In a town where local people built the world's finest steam locomotives, where the smell of burning Pocahontas coal hovered in the air and was accepted, it is Roanoke, where train lovers from around the world met to ride behind great steam engines in times where diesels ruled the road. Now only a steam whistle at the end of the workday is the only remaining part of a glorious past. On October 4th, 1995, 611 is towed to the Transportation Museum. Fireless, smokeless, and whistleless, she is now a dead locomotive, and the sound of the air going through her pistons was a bit much for some. 611 was officially unveiled to the public under the lights during Columbus Day weekend the following Friday. She was not alone that night. As many as 2,000 people showed up to pay a visit to their friend, an 800,000-pound machine that runs like a Swiss watch. And the next day, engineer Bob Saxton was on hand, reminiscing with 611's fans, while on the ground, you could see two friends standing next to each other, and not a word was spoken. This has been a presentation of the Roanoke Chapter National Railway Historical Society, an organization made up entirely of volunteers who worked hard on putting great trips together, such as the ones in this program. The Roanoke Chapter thanks all of you from around the country who came to this town to ride the train. Our mailing list grew, and trip flyers traveled worldwide. The story of Norfolk and Western Class J number 611 is incredible, hauling passengers in the 50s, 80s, and 90s. And as for now, a legend sits quietly in Roanoke, Virginia. 5,000 horsepower quietly tucked away, with wheels that can run over 100 miles an hour. Perhaps someday soon you can come by and see her.